This is kind of showing me that the ruble is de facto becoming a hard currency.
Mm,
Does it mean it's going to be the major reserve currency?
mhm.
It doesn't necessarily mean that.
All right, we're live for the Mike and Mario Show Friday edition. And boy, do we have some interesting topics to touch on today. Hope everyone's doing well. As always, Mario, it's good to connect with you. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, and it's good to connect with you as well, Mike. Yes, we have a lot of things to talk about. Maybe we can start with the Russian ruble. I
Definitely.
noticed today we made a new low in terms of the dollar. We
Hmm.
traded down to 58, and we were speaking a little bit before we started out, and I think if you reference, well, I'm going to reference Jim Sinclair,
Hmm.
from JS Mindset. He was Mr. Gold in the 70s. And he said that the currency of a country is really the common stock of the country, of the economy. So if the dollar, for example, is doing well, that means the economy is doing relatively
Hmm.
well. Uh, so I think this is pointing to forecasting, because a common stock usually discounts forward events. So I think the fact that Russia is such a resource rich nation,
Hmm.
has a lot of commodities, uh, and exports it and gets a lot of its revenues from there. This
Yeah.
is showing that the future, maybe medium term future, is
Hmm.
pretty good for commodities and Russia.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And, it's interesting how, as of right now, the ruble has caused such a stir in the currency markets. At the same time, all fiat currencies, the currency war that's been underway for quite some time, which is the race to zero, utilizing currencies to prop up, weaponize, destroy purchasing power, rob savers. But then again, the Russian ruble, in terms when you compare it to the global standard, which is the USD, for it to be strengthening right now, to me, it only highlights more of the importance of why it's strengthening. And that has a lot to do with, the mention of, they're using the words gold a lot over there. They're using, pay us in our own ruble for energy, or you'll freeze in the wintertime. So it's linking it, and having the narrative of linking it to real things can strengthen anything, you know what I'm saying?
Oh
So,
yeah, and if you look at Russia's financial situation, their debt to GDP, public debt, is less than 20%.
mhm,
Their external debt is very low as well, it's like less than 40%.
yeah.
So this is kind of showing me that the ruble is de facto becoming a hard currency.
Mm,
It just means that this could be the way forward in the multipolar world.
yeah.
I know a lot of people focus on CBDCs, but I
Mhm,
think that's a distraction. That's only a mechanism to move currency around.
yeah.
What's really important is what the currencies are, what assets underpin those currencies. And I think the ruble is showing that de facto they're going on a honest money, well, relatively honest money, because I don't even trust the Russian government either. But
Right.
they seem to be a little more. They uh, they seem to want to base their currency on reality more
Right.
than we do in the West.
Right. And I would say that based upon a narrative coming out of that region, they're just tired of being uh they're tired of the dollar dominance, and of course the military might that has imposed itself all across the Middle East, destabilizing things, and they're very outspoken against that. So their plans to move away from that is becoming obvious, just because of what we talked about earlier with gold and energy, and them actually having real world items that the world needs. But just to play a little bit to what you were talking about, just looking at their financial conditions for the most part, $291 billion national debt. Like, that's very small. When I got out, what is it, population wise, 145, so half the US, give or take. But then again, a GDP 1.4 trillion. So it's like
Yeah,
their financial books is a lot better than ours at this current moment.
but the the GDP seems, the U.S. GDP is 23 trillion,
Hmm.
but a lot of that GDP in the U.S. is based on deficit spending.
Right.
And I don't think Russia's doing that much deficit spending because their debt to GDP is so low.
Hmm.
So, and on a purchasing parity basis,
Hmm.
I would say the Russian GDP is probably a lot better than in relative terms than the US.
Right.
And the other thing about the dollar, if the dollar was as good as gold or silver, a bimetallic dollar,
Hmm.
if the US respected other countries, if they didn't try to use the dollar as a weapon,
Hmm.
then why not keep the dollar? It wouldn't be a problem.
Right.
And I think that's what the Russians and the rest of the world want. It's not that they want to be, on top of things and be a new empire, even though some people think they want to.
Hmm.
I think it's more that they want a fair system where countries can trade with each other and not be uh,
Punished.
under the thumb and
Yeah.
pressured,
Yep.
punished.
Punished for utilizing or punished for not playing along with the globalist agenda. And so here's that other the longer term viewpoint. Let me put this visual up real quick. The longer term viewpoint
Yeah.
going back out to I think it's 2014 if I'm not mistaken. So this is no, it's 2008, 2008. So 2014. Right here in the center areas when things really went bananas, and that
Yeah,
was
the
over the whole
sanctions.
Crimea and
Yeah.
sanctions. So here's just throwing it out there. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. Based upon the current trajectory of the dollar, or the ruble strengthening against the dollar, what's the probability that because of all this commodity talk and gold talk, that it literally strengthens to the point where it returns to pre-Crimex levels, to where it becomes the best performing fiat currency in the last decade or 2 decades, and the world really starts, turning their head and wanting to jump on board the ruble train?
Yeah. Um, I think this chart is like a real eye opener
Hmm.
because a- at a certain point there, after the war started, it looked like Russia could fail. It was a big
Yeah.
gamble, I think.
Right.
But the fact that it's turned around so quickly in the dollar, because this
Hmm.
is how many rubles per dollar you get. The fact that we've broken that line, that
Hmm.
trend line,
Yeah.
is very significant. It just goes to show that I actually think it's a big signal that the debt-based dollar system, and it's not just the dollar, it's also the pound, the
Hmm.
euro, the yen, that's gone now.
Right.
I truly believe this is signaling that. And the other trend line is probably where maybe we could go
Hmm.
eventually. And
Yeah.
you have to remember, just because the dollar's worth 40, let's say ruble, if it goes
Hmm.
down there,
Yeah.
doesn't mean to say the dollar is stronger. It's all relative.
Right.
But and it could even go a lot lower. Who knows where the bottom of this
Chart might go.
chart might go.
Right. And one of the key things that I think would matter to the Russian citizens is that if the dollar, the ruble parity was to go to 40 or below, the purchasing power that they would then be able to have within their own borders, like, sticker prices on the shelves might eventually come down, and it would put them in a better position financially speaking. So that's something to pay attention to as well. So, literally speaking, they could be better off, to where it'd be hard for the West to say that, Russian economy is suffering, the people are, prices are like, oh, really? Okay, sure. Anyway, but that's what's going on. Then also let's touch on just more talks about, the ruble. Russian minister, I'll let you go ahead and jump on this one. Go ahead. This I got this from you.
Yeah, I saw this tweet a couple of days ago, as you can see there, 18th of May, from First Squawk. I recommend people, if you're on Twitter, to follow First Squawk. It says Russian minister says Russia should ask gold for gas
Mm-hmm.
from EU if further sanctions imposed. Local media interview. And gas, of course, is not, it's natural gas, not the kind of gas that, petrol, that Americans call it gas. But
Yeah.
again, you mentioned in the beginning of our chat that there's a lot of mention of commodities, rubles,
Mhm.
and now gold. We
Mhm.
had also, don't forget, when the Russian central bank basically offered 5,000 rubles per gram
Right.
for a while. They're basically using gold as it should
Right.
be used as money. And unfortunately for the West, it's a weapon because the central bankers in the West and governments in the West, they hate gold because gold like handcuffs them.
Right.
It limits their spending power. And I think this might be the way that Russia will try to basically bring down the West,
Mhm.
because if the Western currencies drop very sharply and very quickly versus gold,
Yeah.
yeah, that's gonna really put a dampener on things. And Russia's in a great position because it's got all the resources.
Mhm.
It's got
Mhm.
no debt. They might not be able to buy Louis Vuitton handbags from France or BMWs from Germany, but the majority of Russians are not going to go without. They're going to have
Right.
plenty of food and resources, and it's going to be very cheap for them because they've got it all in their domestic market and their
Right.
currency is strong.
Right. No need to import real world stuff when you can make it at home. So, and also, I guess on the bigger picture, the ruble is the current currency leading the way in this gold, energy backed commodity de facto, as you mentioned, space. But then again, they're a part of a much bigger union, and that happens to be the BRICS. And so it's no way that the Russian ruble will get all this attention without eventually, I guess, China wanting in on that at some point, as well as all the other naturally rich countries that are part of that union getting into play. So this plays into the BRICS meeting that's taking place this week, and announcement of an expansion. And so I think personally, the Russian ruble will probably at some point be the first of many that will open up a much greater talks of that alternative payment system or alternative payment currency or whatever might come first. But just want to put on the screen here just a little bit of a video about the expansion, and give me your thoughts on that. What came to mind when you heard about the whole BRICS expansion situation?
Well, that was the Chinese foreign minister, I said, who said they want to expand the BRICS. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. I mean, this is almost like a lot of people talk about the global South. It's integrating the One Belt, One Road, Africa,
Mm-hmm.
with South Africa, South America. I mean, it's a real challenge for the United States, the UK, and the EU.
Yeah.
I know the the Europe and the Americans, they think of the world as just them,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a whole big wide world out there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's really significant. And I noticed that before the war in the Ukraine, the president of Argentina and the president of Brazil went to Moscow
Mm-hmm.
to meet with Putin. Last year, Brazil surprisingly raised their gold reserves by 60%,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was interesting. And I think this is a long term plan. So I
Yeah.
think they know you're going to need gold, not just commodities like soft commodities, general commodities. Because why would Brazil buy so much gold? Well, because they know maybe that this global South financial monetary architecture will need some kind of gold to settle accounts. You could, for example, Brazil could export coffee to Russia, Russia export some oil to Brazil. And if there's a surplus for Russia of $1 billion, Brazil will have to send that in terms of gold.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think it will work. Or, if the Russians are comfortable with getting the Brazilian currency because it's backed, they could do that as well.
Yeah.
So You also mentioned something about Israel. Maybe we could touch
Yeah,
upon that.
definitely. So before I jump on that real quick, I just pulled up something because BRICS expansion is trending on Twitter, and just you probably won't be able to see it. I mean, if I can zoom in, but at the very bottom here it says just talks about just the BRICS and this is probably a little bit older, but BRICS has more than 16% share in global trade and represents more than 40% of the world's population. And by them looking to expand that, imagine the increase in the global share trade that will be expanded within that union. And then on top of that, if they were 40% of the world population at that point, imagine bringing in, more countries would definitely increase that to where you're going to have so much leverage of having half the world under your organization, as well as being the most interconnected trading mechanism that you're going to have a lot of power behind you whenever they decide to announce or make some moves and where the dollar is no longer needed. But let me grab that article real quick if I can. Let me see. Where's it at? Where'd it go? I lost it. Did I lose it? Nope. Give me 1 second here. Let me find it again. Had so many windows open. Give me 1 second. Let me bring it back up. But I can just share my 2 cents on it real quick. But talking about the possibility and the names of some countries being brought into the fold. And it happened to have Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Israel as to name the few. So whenever I find that article, I can bring it back up again. But anyway, but it's based upon the inclusion possible of Israel. What were your thoughts on that? Why I find this article?
Yeah, I hadn't seen that, and you told me about that. And to me, it might sound a bit counterintuitive that Israel will play along with the BRICS, but I think Israel will play along with any organization that benefits Israel.
Yeah.
And how does Israel benefit the BRICS or the One Belt, One Road? Well, just look at Israel's geographical location. It's a gateway from Asia to the Mediterranean. And you kind of maybe understand why the rest of that region has been so unstable, because it makes Israel really attractive to the Chinese, to the Russians, to bring through, to build a railroad into Israel so they can unload goods into a port in Israel and ship it across to Europe or anywhere they want in the Mediterranean. So yeah, it's a strategic geographical area, and Israel would benefit greatly from that. I think up until the 60s, for example, Lebanon benefited from that geographical position. It was called the Switzerland of the Middle East because it was so strategic. But of course, Lebanon has been a basket case for decades. So, Israel.
And what makes it so interesting is that Israel is such a small piece of land, as you mentioned, it has strategic, purpose when it comes to being out right off the Mediterranean port-wise. But then again, it's surrounded by all those Middle Eastern nations. And of course, we've been talking about how, China's making deals with Saudi Arabia about getting ready to accept and establish different trading deals in oil and energy. And so just the fact that the West, predominantly the U.S., has decided to try to destabilize that entire region in cooperation with Israel, because U.S. and Israel are like this. And so whenever Israel says jump, U.S. jumps, and that we've been funding, sending them missiles and all types of stuff there. But it's just interesting how if Israel decides to just go towards the east, does that mean that the partnership between the West, and their control of the U.S. will shift, or is that all the smoke and mirrors and they're all in this together anyway type of thing? So
I think no, I think Israel still be closely aligned to the U.S. Maybe it's just because the U.S. is not as influential as it used to be in that part of the world. Because we also saw Russia last August sign a military defense agreement with the Saudis. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Israel and the U.S. are like parting ways.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. All right. So we are streaming live. For those that are tuned in, if you're enjoying the back and forth thus far, hit that thumbs up button, show your support for the channel. And let's get it. We'll get ready to throw out some, get some questions and answers. We got way more subjects to touch on. So let's get to a couple more subjects. We'll scan through them real quick and share our 2 cents on it. So let's get right into this whole NATO situation. And so Sweden and Finland seems insisted on trying to join NATO, as if like NATO is really needed at this point, other than just to further put pressure on Russia and make them do something that the world might regret. But with this Turkey situation, you mentioned about there being some hidden agendas behind that. What was that you were saying before we went live?
Yeah, Turkey, they're like playing hard, hard to get, so to speak, because they're part of NATO, and all the countries in NATO need to. It has to be a unanimous approval.
Yeah,
and I think Turkey is trying to negotiate with Sweden because Sweden has supported the Kurds, Kurdish independence, and there's a region in Turkey on the border with Kurdistan or Iraq that they want to break away from Turkey. So I think Turkey is saying, if Sweden wants to be part of NATO, they need to stop supporting the Kurds. As for Finland and Sweden, for that matter, joining NATO, I think it's another provocation for, they're provoking Russia again.
Yeah.
I think Finland, after World War II, it was a special case. There's a term called Finlandization, because Finland became neutral, so it was not supposed to be in NATO or the Warsaw Pact.
Yeah.
And it worked out really well for Finland. Finland is a very wealthy country, it's part of the EU. But now by joining NATO, I think it's a really bad move for them, and for Sweden as well, for that matter.
Yeah.
So I think it's more and more of this provocation. I don't know what the West and NATO or the US and the UK are playing at. I just think they want to make things more and more unstable. So, I forgot another thing about NATO. When countries join NATO, they have to spend increase their military spending quite a lot, and those two countries have basically been neutral for more than 50 years. So that's going to be more money,
right?
Well, for the military industrial complex.
Unless less currency or less taxpayer funds utilized in their own country against for their own citizens, but more towards the globalist agenda. So the cure to humanity's woes right now is to eliminate the World Economic Forum and get rid of NATO. If you were to get rid of those two entities that were not elected by anybody, most people don't even know who's on the board of all those entities.
Maybe
they could care less about them, but yet they seem to have a lot of control over the
maybe
world right now.
Maybe all the central banks as well would be a good thing.
Yeah, that'd be And so to start so we're wishful thinking. But let's keep moving. We got more subjects to touch on. Let me just get to it. So let's talk a little bit about China, man. You did a good video earlier talking about China's situation, and their zero policy seems to be causing more damage than it actually is helping, or is it? Because stimulus, while the world is dialing back on quantitative tightening, they're still easing and expanding. And it's like, okay, what's going on? Are they locking step here or what? But I'm not quite sure. But the printing press still seems to be going in China.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see that $5 trillion they've spent already this year. And I think Shanghai has been under lockdown since March. And if you look at the commodity, Bloomberg Commodity Index, it's been, it topped in March and it stayed pretty flat.
Yeah.
And today I spoke about the fact that they cut mortgage rates in China. Their economy isn't doing well. But I think also later this year, Xi Jinping is trying to get like another term as dictator in chief or whatever he is.
Really?
And he will need the economy to do well. So I'm not surprised they're stimulating. And I think we're going to see commodities go up again, because they're going to try to do as much as possible, I think, to keep this going.
Yeah.
And I also saw an article today that once Shanghai, the port opens, it could create even more havoc in the West Coast in the US, in the in the shipping and supply chain. So it's all a big bit of a mess, I would say.
Yeah. And so here's that, cutting borrowing rates more expected to revive housing sector. So and that's the thing. Okay, so they're trying to revive the housing sector by incentivizing people to go out and borrow. But then
Mm.
again, Evergrande and Cineco and 8 or 9, I forgot, I lost track of the real estate companies that were well beyond their ability to be repaid back their customers. But it's like, okay, their entire economy has been bent on allowing real estate to be the primary savings vehicle, along with gold and things like that. And so they're trying to get people back into that same bubble as it's bursting. So it's like something is not right about that. And will people fall
Well,
for it a second time?
yeah, I guess they're following the Western model, isn't it? I mean, we had our real estate collapse in '08, and they've been repumping it again.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they're not that much clever. They're not that smart either. The Chinese, I would say.
Yeah.
Um, but at least they have a lot of gold, and at least they have a big industrial manufacturing economy. At least they're still also making things.
Right. And it's interesting. It's interesting the difference in the fact that, the Asian region, naturally their citizens have more gold and being encouraged to get gold throughout the last just throughout this entire transition. Whereas here in the West, other than people who are awakened and tune in and things like this, people be like, why would I want gold? I
Yeah.
just want to wear it. If
I,
I can't wear
yeah.
it, why do I want it? So big
I
difference.
think yeah, sorry.
No problem.
I,
Go ahead.
I think the reason why the Chinese encourage the public to buy gold is that they need to keep the public happy in China because it's a very, it's a huge country, and I don't think the Communist Party is that powerful,
Mm-hmm.
especially if things start getting bad economically. And I think they know that the whole currency system is very fragile and inflationary. So they actually do that as a way to keep people, happy. But here in the West, people don't care. They're so out of it that the politicians uh, keep encouraging us to borrow and spend more.
Right.
But
Yeah. Okay. So a couple more topics here. And so speaking of gold, let's just go ahead and touch on the tweet you put out earlier in reference to Harry Dent and his call for $900 gold in a worst case scenario of what's coming. But go ahead. I'll share I'll show the video. So this is the video. I actually shared it earlier as well. It says everything bubble will burst. Gold to 900, Bitcoin at 3,000 before hitting 500K.
yeah, well, Harry Dent. I mean, I agree with him that there will eventually be a collapse of the
Mm-hmm.
economies, and that the demographics are not great. The baby boomers are retiring,
Yeah.
and he's using the model. The Japanese, looking back, the Japanese, they started their baby boomers, or whatever they call them there,
Mm-hmm.
started retiring in the late '80s, early '90s, and Japan has been in a very has been a stagnant economy,
Mm-hmm.
and people call it deflationary. 3 lost decades.
Mm-hmm.
And but if you look at the price of gold in yen, it's gone from 40,000 in the early '90s, and it's almost at 260,000. And why is that? Well, because if the Bank of Japan wasn't printing money like crazy, the Japanese government would have gone bust already, because they
Mm-hmm.
have a debt to GDP over 200%.
Yeah.
So Harry Dent said that the safest place to be is 10-year treasury notes and 30-year treasury bonds. And I don't agree with that, because the US is up to here in debt, not as
Mm-hmm.
much as Japan, but it's also got all the unfunded liabilities. So if the economy collapses, where's the taxes gonna, where are the taxes gonna come from to cover those debt payments, to repay the debt? And now, seeing that a lot of the world doesn't want to invest in treasuries anymore, I don't see treasuries as a safe place to be.
Mm-hmm.
We saw in 2011, when the European sovereign debt crisis happened, it was a deflationary collapse in Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Ireland, and people weren't rushing to buy their bonds. Their yields spiked massively, and they were collapsing. So he could be right about the deflation, but I think he's wrong about the safety of treasuries.
Right.
And
Right.
and even
You know what? Based upon Harry Dent's viewpoint, I see how his cycle. He's a cycles guy, so he demographic whatever. So I can understand like he still has a frame of reference of everything returning to some form of normalcy in his future, with the Federal Reserve being the savior of the day. And given the fact that he has yet to mention the reset, the rebooting of the system, the shift out east, he focused solely on what is actually in front of him. So it's only natural based upon history. The Federal Reserve will come in and buy everything up,
well,
and things will
actually,
go back.
I don't think he expects the Federal Reserve to come in and do more QE. That's the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. So where's
And
that? So that's a good. So where would all those funds come from to
yeah,
support the bonds
they
to then
won't.
give
I think
confidence?
if the Fed doesn't save the day, Uncle Sam will go bust.
Right.
Alan Greenspan said a few years ago on TV, "Oh, we can always print money. The Treasury will never go bust."
Mm-hmm.
But according to Harry Dent, the Fed's going to stop. And
Okay, so that doesn't make sense because someone will have to be the buyer of all those debt instruments because the government's definitely going to issue them. They're going to issue them like never before. Possibly, I still have my suspicions as to how the Federal Reserve may intentionally not come in and save the day, but we'll have to see how it works out. But regardless, it's denominated in the Federal Reserve note, aka the USD. So that right there is the weapon. So if you get in the bonds and if they're denominated in dollars, it's like, what do you still have? What will you really have at the end of the day? So that's the
nothing,
problem.
nothing.
You'll have nothing. Exactly.
Yeah,
It's going to zero. So
in the old days, you had some gold backing it, and that's why gold was confiscated in the early 1930s, because there was a deflationary collapse, and the only thing that was worth anything was gold. Why would you confiscate gold if it was so useless in a deflationary collapse?
Right. Good point there. Good point there. Way to square Mr. Dinaway. Okay, let's jump right into some more stuff here.
We got some super chats, I think.
Okay, let's address those real quick. Okay, let's get it out there. Keenan, appreciate you, man. It says, why would the IMF add more yuan? Oh, okay, to the basket with a pending bond collapse? Did the Shanghai shutdown provide the leverage?
So I didn't realize the IMF have they changed the SDR basket?
Yeah, so I did a little thing. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. I mentioned that, and it didn't change much. But
it probably got to do with the reserves that the countries hold. So it probably means that the Chinese yuan has become more widely held internationally. So they've adjusted the basket. That's all it is.
So here's our headline here, and this was as of I think it was Monday or Tuesday. But IMF increases weight of U.S. So it's so the U.S. the euro was decreased and the yen was decreased, but the dollar and the yuan both got a bump up, a point or two or so. And so my whole rant,
the pound also fell. I think it's all got to do with the trade flows and how well their economies have done.
Yeah.
So
we went from 41.73 to 43.38 and 10.92 to 12.28. And so my thesis was it was a way because somebody mentioned, or one of the community members mentioned that, they were scheduled to do this in July. I think it takes effect August 1st or whatever. But then again, they made this announcement earlier than usual in May, which is like, okay, why now? What are they trying to do? And my thing was they're just trying to pacify China to just give them that illusion that, their currency can become a reserve asset as well, as if they're waiting on approval from the West. I don't give a damn. I
don't think it's very significant news, but anyway.
Yeah. I think it's only important in relation to the West continue to control the monetary structure if the SDR will actually be used as the next world reserve currency that everyone will run to, and I don't think they will. So
the SDR is even worse than fiat currency because fiat currency, at least you know the country that issues it. SDR is just, I think John Exter said, the dollar after 71 is a I owe you nothings. And he said the SDRs were who owes you nothing. So you don't know what it is and you don't know who owes you.
Right.
So SDR is a bad idea.
Yeah, it's a bad idea, and we'll see because the S. Watch this. So here's the thing: the SDR could be recognized and acknowledged only if the West give China what they want, which is the BRICS and the AIIB come out with their own, to where like with Jerome Powell talking about, there's a possibility of there being multiple reserve currencies, so we can have an SDR interoperable. Or it could interconnected with the BRICS version, and there'd be two that they try to counterbalance and weigh them however they weigh them against each other. So that could be something that, if a compromise was to come about, if it was really about the East and West divide, it's a possibility. But to piggyback on that about the shutdown providing leverage, I'm not quite sure how that would provide any more confidence in the IMF system, SDR system. So not sure, Kay, 100%. Let's get to the next one. Chris, appreciate you, man. It says, can you elaborate more on why you think increasing inflation can cause supply chain shortages? Thanks. Let me see that. I'm not sure if I said that. That's a statement or a comment you made, Mario?
It's a question. I didn't make. I can answer that question though.
Go ahead.
Well, when you have inflation, companies' margins go down, right? And yeah, it's harder for them to make profits, and they might go out of business. So if companies go out of business, there's less goods being produced.
Right.
So less goods, less supply. Right. And also, if the inflation gets out of hand, producers won't want to sell their goods because they know the currency is going down. So that disrupts supply. You look back at hyperinflation in Germany in the 20s and even in France in the 1790s. Farmers go on strike, so to speak, because they know the currency is bad and they don't want to exchange something valuable for something that is not valuable and is losing value quickly. And I think a lot of the food price rises that we're seeing in the last 2 years or so is to do with that. Producers, farmers subconsciously feel that, and I think it was to do with the lockdowns when central banks printed trillions upon trillions out of thin air. They realized subconsciously that this money is funny. We want more for our hard-earned crops. All the work we do.
Good point there, and just increasing inflation. Increasing inflation can cause supply chain shortages, and that is just because.
I think I talked about the fact as well that what we've seen since the fall of Bretton Woods is more and more creation of money and credit, money going into finance, and not focusing so much on real things.
Yeah.
And even though we're led to believe we've had 30 years of very low inflation, I think it's the opposite. We've had a lot of inflation. It's mostly going into finance. And now it's starting to go into real goods. And we find that because of financialization, we've neglected infrastructure and real things.
Right. And just, look at the overall cost of living and how it's eroded the family structure as far as, single income, double income. Now you maybe need third, three, four, got the kids working and everything in between. So, the purchasing power has been eroded throughout the last several years, and it's only increasing. And the fact that the Federal Reserve and central banks now are admitting it, that they're having some issues. Let me get to this article real quick if I can find it. The one I mentioned, let me see, where's it at? Did I got it? Damn, I don't got it. But it was talking about the IMF was worried about prolonged inflation and things getting out of hand. Of course, they're trying to use the Ukraine war situation and the zero policy in China as excuses as to why.
Yeah.
Let me.
I
I've
think
got the
it was
article.
the managing director of the IMF,
Yeah.
Georgieva. Yeah.
Let me grab that article. I thought
She
that was
she
interesting how they're
actually, I think she was at a few weeks ago she was sitting down with Lagarde and Powell, and
yeah.
she admitted, yeah, we printed too much money, and it's not surprising it's
Yeah.
coming home to roost. It's like she's trying to,
It was amazing that she said that, and they were just sitting there listening to her like, wow, like she said that. Like, but they at this point in the game they can say it because it'll go under the radar for those that have no clue what's going on, but only people who are aware of them being the actual problem would
yeah,
actually pick that up. But here's the article I was referring to about
yeah.
multiple inflationary shocks amid market jitter. So, yeah, it's just these people, man. These people here
Just
have
the term multiple inflationary shocks. I think that's like a misrepresentation. It's just an inflationary. It's the consequence of decades of inflation.
yeah.
By talking about multiple shocks, it looks like it's something that's
It's just
uh,
a
it,
global
yeah.
warns of a
Well, yeah,
global.
yeah, global. Yeah, that's
Global, not multiple, because the multiple makes it seem like it's certain pockets, like it's this country,
yeah.
this country, rather than saying it's the
She
entire
should
central
she
banking
should she
structure.
should have said, warns of central bank, induced inflationary
Inflationary.
shock. That would be the real truth, but she works for the central banks, I guess, so
Right. There's only so much truth they can let leak out. But anyway, let's get to some more questions. Mario, scan through the chat, see
yeah.
what you see. Highlight everything in dollar to stand
How
out and
many
be easier to jump
countries
on.
are undergoing collapse at present time? Douglas, uh, Stejkal.
How many countries are undergoing collapse at the present time?
Well,
Ooh, great.
Sri Lanka, I guess Lebanon, it's been going on for 2 years. Western Europe, the EU, the UK. I mean, there's quite a few, I think.
Yeah. And the best I'm trying I forgot there was a website where the best way to determine or to recognize which ones are failing and how fast, just look at the currencies.
Yeah,
And so look at the currencies, when they're measured against the
yeah,
USD.
that's a good
Those
point.
are the emerging markets, wherever they all fall up in that category. The ones that are tanking the fastest are the ones where
Yeah,
they're having the most issue. And so the
yeah,
ones you named plus a lot more.
Iran, Argentina. Yeah, I think the US as well. The dollar looks strong, versus other fiat currencies, but I don't
Zimbabwe,
think it's in good shape.
Lebanon,
Yeah,
Japan,
Japan, I agree.
Canada soon. We got Syria, Venezuela. We got
Uh,
Turkey.
Port Film Co-op.
What's that?
He's got a super chat there.
Uh,
What do you guys think of the WHO treaty? I think it's great.
uh, couldn't be any
I'm
better.
joking. I don't think it's great. Well, I think it's another move towards global government,
Mhm,
because it's giving the head of the WHO, which is heavily financed by Bill Gates, the
mhm,
power to tell us what we can and cannot do.
yeah.
It's a bad thing. I signed a petition here in the UK.
Mhm.
For Parliament to look into the matter. I don't know if they're going to do anything about it.
Yeah, this is of concern, and it's amazing that Fox News, Tucker Carlson, he's been getting a lot of heat lately, but he's been given permission, I guess, because he's reading from a teleprompter. So whoever's writing his script is obviously a part of the CNN, MSNBC. So they all went to the same school and study together and hang out together. So the fact that his script is different, everybody else's script is like, that's that good guy, bad guy. The fact that he's allowed to say stuff, but then again, it only furthers the narrative of the extremists, the extreme right. It's a
Yeah,
lot of divisive labels right now. We got the extreme right. We got the terrorism bill that's been put forth. We got the price gouging bill which is unrelated to this, but. So
yeah,
it's amazing how certain things are able to slip and some things are not. But once again, we got the primary concern here is midterms. So we got a lot of the returning politicians back. They're getting their seats back apparently, but that's what they're focused on. But they're not talking about the underlying issue of this pandemic treaty, which is like they know about it, but they're not saying nothing about it. So
Yeah, he went to Tucker Carlson. He went to the same high school or a
mhm,
prep school called St. George's School
mhm.
as Vincent Astor, John Jacob Astor, uh, Prescott Bush. So
Mm,
I mean, it doesn't mean that he's working for these people, but
right.
I actually, he might be reading from the teleprompter, but he could be writing for, what's on the teleprompter. It
Which
could
could be
be what he thinks.
which would be good if it was his own thoughts. And
Yeah.
so, did you see that? So I think the quote about Elon Musk saying that whoever reads from the teleprompter is the real president.
No, whoever writes
Right? Yeah.
what's on the teleprompter is the real president. Yeah.
I thought that was funny. All right, so let's get some more questions. Feel free to throw out thoughts, ideas, suggestions, questions, whatever. I see more people giving out countries that are failing.
Haiti. Well, I
Haiti,
think Haiti has been a basket case forever. So,
yeah, and so another indicator, another way to tell which countries are not doing well. Look who the IMF have extended loans to, because they're further enslaving
yeah,
them with debt. So, yeah, all the IMF participating members is borrowing is in trouble.
I guess Ukraine isn't doing too well.
Right. But then again, we just passed 40 billion last week, and then like the next day, Biden asked for 100 million worth of military aid.
Yeah,
So
I wonder where that 40 billion is really going.
yeah, it's going
Mm.
it's being funneled through the too big to fail banks into it's been divvied up into like the military industrial complex accounts, pharmaceutical accounts,
Yeah,
politicians
I don't think
accounts.
it's really going to help the people of the
Oh, it's
Ukraine.
not getting
That's
to
for sure.
Ukraine, and I haven't really covered or talked about Ukraine much. But from what you've been paying attention to, because the pictures we were getting out of Ukraine, they show buildings burning and cities demolished. I'm thinking like those pictures could have been like from 10, 12 years ago. Who knows? I don't really think there's as much destruction taking place in Ukraine as the media wants us to believe, because Pelosi went, Trudeau went, everybody doing, guest appearances, meeting Zelensky over there. Either they're not really in Ukraine, or Ukraine is not as bad as far as it being war torn, similar to
Mm,
like Iraq. And,
yeah,
you wouldn't go into Iraq and Saudi Arabia, not Saudi Arabia, but Iraq and other countries when they were in the middle of war to do press
no.
ops. So, yeah, man, these people are funny. Anyway, what else we got here? It says, why?
10% for the big guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what, 4 billion?
Yeah. So yeah, the Biden family, I'm sure, is doing quite well. And where's Hunter at? It's good to say he's shaking some deals and negotiating as well. So
Hunter must be at the what's that place called? The Bohemian Grove. Uh,
so ISP, this is interesting. So once again, this is just taking out far left field. Put your tinfoil hat on here, but it's a possibility. It says, why would the globalists use a clone of Biden instead of the real guy?
because the real guy's not around anymore, maybe.
Right. And speaking of which, I put something on my Telegram a moment ago. Let me copy post this. So this is what I put out there. It's just I like going far left field. I got my tinfoil hat. I keep it right by my side because you never know when I want to go far left field. But just look at this picture here. We'll put it on the screen here. Look at this picture here, and tell me something don't look right. Something doesn't look right as to how both of these young men have aged. Like I've aged, I've changed, but these guys look like two different gentlemen as they've aged.
Yeah, well, the thing is, those pictures are, I mean, what, 10 years apart or more?
Could
People
be,
do
yeah,
change, but
yeah. But I just,
um, I
I
guess
like to go.
Putin is put on a bit of weight. I
Yeah,
guess.
but then again, when you dive deep, you look at the ear structure, you look at the
Mm,
ear, the
well,
nose
yeah,
pointing,
but
fat brown
it
ears.
could be the angle as well of the photo. I mean, I think this,
Okay,
yeah,
okay, I'll leave it alone.
it's a
I'll leave
little
it
bit
alone.
too much.
You know-
I know what you mean, though. They do look. It's like the Queen here. The other day, she went out for some kind of horse riding event,
Mhm.
and she looked completely different than the pictures we've seen of her. And someone said, "Oh,
Mm.
it's one of her, doubles." but people are always speculating about those things.
Yeah, and I just think like at this current moment with the technology that's available, there's a lot
Mm.
more out there than we are allowed to know.
Anything is
And
possible. I saw the other day there's a a little they adapted a little video of the debate between Trump and Biden, and they made them look like babies.
yeah,
That was creepy, but it was really good. So they can
uh,
do anything.
right, especially with the camera tricks,
Mm.
make you think you're on the space station.
Yeah, we could do the Mike and Mario show, and we could look like 2-year-olds, you know.
Right, that would be funny. We might try that. Here's a question here from Brooks. It says, "What happens when we go into a deflationary event with the ISM hitting all-time lows?"
Well, I think the will be heavy loads, high unemployment, bankruptcies. Yeah, it won't be pretty.
Yeah, and speaking of which, let's let me see. Let me pull this up real quick. Let's
And
see
I
what
think
the
the politicians and the central bankers will try to uh, fight that tooth and nail, and that's why I think they'll continue to print and stimulate.
yeah, let me so what's the manufacturer index? What is I haven't checked it in a minute. Where we at? Ooh,
ISM, it's above 50. I think he means if it goes below 50,
yeah,
you know, above 50 means it's the economy is expanding.
yeah.
Below 50 is contracting. So, I mean, if you go max, you know, it got down to 40 during COVID, which
You
was
gotta be
normal because they shut the economy down.
yeah.
But
So, but as of right now, it's
it's
clear it's
still
trending. It's
the trend
trending.
isn't good, is it? The trend
Right,
is
not at
down.
all. Trend is not our friend on this one. So, yeah, it's just and I think there's so many indexes and metrics that we
Yeah,
can use that
yeah.
all show everything going. And so,
And don't
and that's
forget
why,
the don't forget the ISM is a survey of managers, purchasing managers. It's not a real data. It's like
right.
how they feel things are going forward.
hmm here's a comment here. Ahmed Sercano and Charles de Gaulle stood up against Nixon shockwave, full faith and credit call clause for the SDR.
Yeah, I know. The goal was he was a gold bug, so to speak. He made a
Mhm.
speech.
I heard that
Yeah,
one.
he was pro gold.
What else we got? Okay, so let's let me see. It says what is LBP, low blood pressure said, what is the next crisis? That is that's that is a false not a false flag. There's so there
They probably are all false flags, aren't they? A
yeah,
lot of
they're
these
they're they're
crises.
they're all flags, that's for sure. But the next I think the next thing that could be of concern, let me see if I got something on my screen here.
Monkeypox.
Okay, that's on
That's
the
what
table.
Rolf Steiner thinks. Yeah, I was reading about that. Apparently, it only affects a certain group of people.
Yeah.
You know, like gay men or something like that. But who
Uh
knows?
Yeah. So this is an event that is brewing. China launches military exercise in South
Mm,
China Sea as Biden visits Asia. So China-Taiwan situation is yet to fully unfold, even though
yeah.
we all kind of suspect that at some moment a move will be made, and then we'll see what the West does. Because with the Russian ruble now taking more of a dominant role in the fiat realm because of linkage to gold, silver, China has been making preparations for the day that they might fall under the sanctions as well. So they might
Mm,
say to hell with it. Let's just go ahead and do this. Just go
yeah.
take back to Taiwan. We will get sanctioned. We will get put on the removed from the SWIFT.
Mm,
Then the Chinese yuan gold peg becomes a topic, and then gold
yeah.
and commodity. So that could be that next catalyst of the yuan being brought out. They mentioned the gold if they decide to
Or
go into
or
Taiwan.
the next crisis. I think what we are in it is the inflationary crisis that will probably could lead to hyperinflation. I
Mhm,
think we're already the central banks are not doing enough to stop inflation.
mhm. Yeah. And then, so, of course, we had that shooting in Buffalo and the Domestic Terrorism Act bill that was passed in the House. And so let's end talking about the price gouging bill.
Oh, okay.
Let me grab that real quick. But that right there is let me see. Let me pull it up real quick. But the price gouging bill. So yeah, so this is being sold as, oh, it's going to help us control, the evil energy companies. It says House passes bill to crack down on gasoline price gouging. So ultimately, they're pointing gas on a fire and expected it to go down.
Richard Nixon tried that in the early 70s, price controls, and it
Yeah.
led to more shortages, higher prices. So, yeah, unfortunately, I guess Congress is insane because the definition of insanity is like you keep doing the same thing that doesn't work.
Right. So yeah, so basically we have relatively high prices now, so expect higher. And then I think there's an article saying Washington State, there's gas stations that don't have it gas, so they're having to increase the prices severely for what they do have left. So yeah, more problems, man. But anyway, we're approaching that 55-minute mark, and we've been going at it, man. So, Mario, let's get ready to dial back. As always, for those that have plugged in with us, we appreciate you. Manico64 on YouTube, Rethinking a Dollar, wherever you can find me. Let's end on a good note, man. What comes to mind, Mario? Give us some good news to sign off with.
Good news. Well,
I mean, it doesn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I just think that I don't see that. The only good thing that I'm seeing is that the system is like unraveling. The central bankers are losing control, and that's a good thing because we need to go in a better system, or we need to find sanity.
Right.
But it's going to be, unfortunately, it's going to be disruptive. But hopefully, for the people who follow us, it won't be surprising to them. I would say that's the good news.
Right. I mean, that's definitely so. The good thing is more people are waking up to what's really happening, and so the lies are becoming harder to spread because you can tell the alternative media is doing a good job because they were attempting to come out with the misinformation board or Ministry of Trust, but that got shot down temporarily. But then again, on all the platforms, if you want to find truth or the closest thing to it, look for wherever they've tagged fact checkers, or they say this is misinformation, or this is, quoted wrong, and then do your own research on top of that, and you'll get close to the truth. And more people, I think, are doing that and will do that, and the truth will set you free. You know what I'm saying? 100%. So it's a matter of what you do from that point on. But
that's a good way to wrap it up. Truth shall set you free.
All right, people. Well, hey, once again, appreciate you for blessing us with your time and presence. Be blessed, be safe. Have a great weekend. Back at it again next week because there's going to be always something to talk about. So we'll try to do our best to keep you guys plugged in. Peace.